Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Welcome to the BioLine RX First Quarter 2022 Results Conference Call. All participants are presently in a listen-only mode. Following management's formal presentation, instructions will be given for the question and answer session. For operator assistance during the conference, please press *0. I would now like to turn the call over to Tim McCarthy of LifeSci Advisors. Please go ahead.
Thank you, operator. Before turning the call over to management, I would like to make the following remarks concerning forward-looking statements. All statements in this conference call, other than historical facts, are indeed forward-looking statements. The words anticipate, believe, estimate, expect, intend, guidance, confidence, target, project, and other similar expressions are used typically to identify such forward-looking statements. These forward-looking statements are not guarantees of future performance and may involve and are subject to certain risks and uncertainties and other factors that may affect BioLine RX's business, financial condition, and other operating results. These include, but are not limited to, the risk factors and other qualifications contained in BioLine RX's annual report on Form 20-F, quarterly reports filed in the 6K, and other reports filed by BioLine RX with the SEC to which your attention is directed. Actual outcomes and results may differ materially from what is expressed or implied by these forward-looking statements. BioLine RX expressly disclaims any intent or obligation to update these forward-looking statements. At this time, it is now my pleasure to turn the call over to Mr. Phil Serlin, Chief Executive Officer of BioLine RX.
Thank you, Tim, and good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us on our first quarter results conference call today. Earlier this morning, we issued a press release, a copy of which is available in the Investor Relations section of our website. It was also filed as a 6K. I will begin with an overview of our first quarter, then Molly Zevi, our Chief Financial Officer, will provide a discussion of our financial results. We will then open up the call and are looking forward to your questions. Joining the call as well for Q&A are Abby Weinstein, our Chief Medical Officer, and Ella Serrani, our Chief Development Officer. I'll start with a brief introduction. As we approach the most important milestone of the company's history, we are increasingly optimistic about the potential of motixafortide as part of a new treatment paradigm in stem cell mobilization for multiple myeloma patients, physicians, and transplant centers. Driven by this enthusiasm, we have been working tirelessly to both prepare our new drug application and to position this therapy for a robust and successful commercial launch in 2023 if approved. Moving on to the NDA submission. As mentioned, we are moving forward aggressively and efficiently with the completion of our NDA and remain on target for a mid-year submission consistent with what we have stated previously. Recall that in mid-December of last year, we held a pre-NDA meeting with the FDA to obtain agreement from the agency that our single phase 3 Genesis study would be sufficient to submit an NDA for motixafortide as a stem cell mobilization agent for autologous bone marrow transplantation in multiple myeloma patients. Needless to say, we were very pleased that the FDA agreed that our proposed data package would be sufficient to support an NDA submission. Based on our projected timelines regarding a submission in the next few months, This would likely point to a commercial launch of motixafortide in 2023 should it be approved. As a brief reminder, our Genesis Phase 3 trial of motixafortide in stem cell mobilization met all primary and secondary endpoints with a very high degree of statistical significance, a p-value of less than 0.0001. Approximately 90% of patients underwent transplantation after mobilizing the target number of stem cells following only one administration of motixafortide and in only one apheresis session. In addition, patients in the motixafortide plus GCSF arm collected an average of approximately 11 million stem cells per kilogram in only one apheresis session versus approximately 2 million in the GCSF arm. This compelling data, and specifically the high level of certainty regarding the number of apheresis sessions required for mobilization, enables more efficient utilization of apheresis units at transplantation institutions where there is often a shortage of available machines. Now let me turn to our pre-launch activities. In parallel to the NDA submission activities, we continue to evaluate all of our options with respect to the commercialization of motixafortide in the U.S. In this regard, we are advancing a broad range of pre-launch activities that would be required under any commercialization scenario, whether we commercialize with a partner or independently. Our goal is to be prepared for launch on time and to facilitate the rapid uptake of motixafortide. As we indicated last quarter, this opportunity is very focused and concentrated, as approximately 80 transplant centers out of 212 across the United States perform roughly 80% of all stem cell transplant procedures. Therefore, the commercialization expenses and footprint required would be limited relative to a more traditional oncology launch in a broader indication. Given this dynamic, we continue to maintain optionality with respect to the launch of motixafortide, either with a commercialization partner or independently, and we will ultimately do what will allow us to extract the most value from this asset in the U.S. and globally. Let me now speak a little bit about a market assessment. As we indicated last quarter, we have done some extensive analysis to understand the addressable market for motixafortide in stem cell mobilization. This includes a market assessment that we commissioned through a well-respected third-party vendor, ZS Associates. The conclusion is that in 2021, the value of the U.S. stem cell mobilization market was estimated at approximately $360 million and is continuing to grow. Globally, we believe the addressable market exceeds $500 million. There are over 20,000 hematopoietic stem cell transplantations annually in the U.S., approximately 60% of which are autologous, and this number has shown continuous growth over the last several years. Within the U.S. stem cell mobilization market, multiple myeloma represents the largest opportunity, approximately 58% of all autologous transplants. Historically, GCSF alone was the primary agent used to mobilize hematopoietic stem cells to the peripheral blood for collection and subsequent transplantation. However, the use of GCSF generally requires multiple apheresis stays to reach the target number of cells for collection, and in a substantial number of instances, there are still patients who remain unable to produce the target number of cells for autologous transplantation. Furthermore, the need for multiple apheresis sessions increases healthcare costs and is a logistical burden to the already busy apheresis units, in addition to the fact that it causes an increase in the adverse events related to apheresis procedures. With the advancement of new induction treatment regimens for multiple myeloma patients, which generally include multiple therapeutic compounds within the combination, the subsequent risk of mobilization failure continues to increase. To date, higher intensity 3 or 4 drug regimens have become the standard of care induction treatment for all autologous stem cell transplant eligible patients. Recent data have demonstrated that use of such higher intensity induction treatments can lead to impairment of stem cell mobilization. In addition, age is a predictor of stem cell mobilization response, and elderly patients are being treated more frequently than in the past. The number of autologous transplants for the treatment of malignant diseases in older patients continues to increase. This is evident from the last analysis conducted by the Center for International Blood and Marrow Transplant Research. showing an increase in the annual number of autologous transplantations for multiple myeloma from approximately 3,000 in 2009 to approximately 8,000 in 2019. With patients aged 65 and over comprising 22% of total patients in 2009 and increasing to 36% of total patients in 2019. Based on the above need for better mobilization agents, growth in this market over the last few years has been driven by the increased upfront use of the plerixafor plus G-CSF combination therapy to drive stem cell mobilization, especially in multiple myeloma patients. The plerixafor unit and dollar volume performance in the U.S. over the past few years indicates increased use of the product in stem cell transplants. And as mentioned, this dynamic has been exacerbated in recent years by the introduction of more effective and aggressive induction therapies, which on the one hand have had higher initial response and remission rates, but on the other hand have negatively impacted stem cell yields even with plerixafor, which on average requires at least 2 administrations and 2 apheresis sessions in order to reach the target mobilization. This trend highlights the ever-increasing need for a better and more potent mobilizer, and we believe that is motixafortide. In this regard, we believe that based on its differentiated clinical data, coupled with its favorable pharmacoeconomic data, which we will recap in a moment, motixafortide plus G-CSF has the potential to gain a significant share of the market and become the new standard of care for stem cell mobilization in patients undergoing autologous stem cell transplantation. In addition, longer term, we believe that our product has the potential to expand beyond multiple myeloma to other indications. Now let me briefly talk about our pharmacoeconomic studies. At this point, I will briefly mention the 2 studies we commissioned, one comparing motixafortide against G-CSF, and the second comparing motixafortide against plerixafor. Both of these studies were performed by the Global Health Economics and Outcomes Research, or HEOR team of IQVIA, one of the leading global providers of advanced analytics, technology solutions, and clinical research in the biotech pharma industry. So they were rigorously designed and executed. Both studies identified significant cost savings from using motixafortide, driven by its ability to optimize the mobilization and collection of stem cells, and therefore reduce the number of apheresis sessions, in turn driving benefits to the patients, centers, and payers. Against G-CSF alone, motixafortide plus G-CSF was associated with a statistically significant decrease in health resource utilization during the autologous stem cell transplantation process. Given the higher number of mobilized cells and lower number of apheresis sessions, lifetime estimates showed a net cost savings of approximately $19,000, not including the cost of motixafortide against G-CSF alone. Against plerixafor in combination with G-CSF, IQVIA did a cross-study comparison, and these results even surpassed the economic benefits seen in the pharmacoeconomic study versus G-CSF alone. In this study, lifetime estimates showed a net cost savings of approximately $30,000, not including the cost of motixafortide, for motixafortide plus G-CSF versus plerixafor plus G-CSF. We believe that the compelling clinical data from our Phase 3 Genesis trial, as well as the compelling cost savings identified by these studies, strongly support our view that motixafortide in combination with G-CSF can become the new standard of care for all multiple myeloma patients undergoing autologous stem cell transplantation at all treatment centers. Together with the data previously mentioned from the Genesis trial, showing that nearly 90% of patients collected an optimal number of cells for transplantation following a single administration of motixafortide and in only 1 apheresis session, versus less than 10% for G-CSF alone, the pharmacoeconomic studies provide a strong commercial case for the use of motixafortide on top of G-CSF and should leave substantial room to optimize our pricing strategy for motixafortide at product launch if approved. Now let me briefly talk about our pancreatic cancer study. Turning now to motixafortide pancreatic cancer, or PDAC program, recall that we previously announced positive final results from the Phase 2A Combat Keynote 202 triple combination study of motixafortide in combination with Merck's anti-PD-1 Keytruda and chemotherapy as a second-line therapy. A total of 43 patients initially diagnosed with unresectable stage 4 metastatic PDAC who had progressed following first-line gemcitabine-based therapy were enrolled. As a reminder, data from this study demonstrated a substantial improvement across all study endpoints as compared to historical data, including median overall survival, median progression-free survival, confirmed overall response rate, and disease control rate. With regard to the next steps for our PDAC program, as we previously indicated, we continue to engage in discussions with potential biopharma partners with the goal of collaborating on a randomized controlled phase 2b study. Turning to AGI-134 now. Regarding our second clinical candidate, the intratumoral anti-cancer vaccine, AGI-134, recall that we are evaluating safety, tolerability, and proof of mechanism in multiple solid tumor types in a phase 1/2a study. The study is designed to evaluate a wide array of biomarkers and assess both clinical and pharmacodynamic parameters. In September 2019, we announced positive safety data, and later that same month, we moved quickly to initiate Part 2, the dose expansion phase. We have now completed enrollment in Part 2, and we plan to announce the phase 1/2a study readout in the second half of this year, consistent with our prior guidance. To help advance this and other company activities in the field of immuno-oncology, and specifically with regard to AGI-134, in December we announced the formation of an Immuno-Oncology Scientific Advisory Board, or SAB. This advisory board is comprised of highly regarded thought leaders in the fields of immuno-oncology, intratumoral injections, and clinical development, and we are already benefiting from their unique experience and perspectives. I would now like to turn the call over to Molly Zevi, our CFO, who will give a brief overview of our key fourth quarter financial statement items. Molly, please go ahead.
Thank you, Phil. As is our practice, in our financial discussion, we will only go over a few significant items on this call: research and development expenses and cash. Therefore, let me invite you to review the filings we made this morning, which contain our financials, operating and financial review, and press release for additional information. Research and development expenses for the quarter ended March 31st, 2022 were $4.4 million, an increase of $0.1 million, or 3.7% compared to $4.3 million for the comparable period in 2021. The increase resulted primarily from an increase in expenses associated with the AGI-134 study, offset by lower expenses associated with the completed motixafortide, Genesis, and Combat clinical trials. Turning to cash, the company held $50.6 million of cash equivalents, and short-term bank deposits as of March 31st, 2022. We believe we are well financed to achieve multiple potentially value-creating milestones into the first half of 2024. And with that, I'll turn the call back over to Phil.
Thank you, Molly. In closing, as is our custom, I would like to take a few moments to summarize our key upcoming milestones. First, submission of an NDA to the FDA for motixafortide as a novel mobilization agent for multiple myeloma patients undergoing autologous stem cell transplantation in mid-2022. Second, announcement of initial results for Part 2 of the Phase 1/2a trial of AGI-134 in solid tumors in the second half of 2022. And now for some slightly longer-term milestones. We plan to initiate a Phase 2 study for AGI-134 in 2023. We hope for potential FDA approval for motixafortide in 2023, and we hope to potentially launch motixafortide in the U.S. in stem cell mobilization in 2023. With that, we have now concluded the formal part of our presentation. Operator, we will now open up the call to questions.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we will begin the question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, please press star 1. To withdraw your question, press star 2. If you are using speaker equipment, kindly lift the handset before pressing the numbers. Your questions will be polled in the order they are received. Please stand by while we poll for your questions. The first question is from Mark Breidenbach of Oppenheimer. Please go ahead.
Hey, thanks for taking the questions and congrats on the forward progress. Bill, I guess I'm just wondering if you've commissioned any European market assessment or pharmacoeconomic studies for motixafortide, and maybe you can offer some comments on the potential timeline for an MAA filing for motixafortide.
Yeah, so first of all, Mark, it's good to speak to you. Yes, so with regard to a market assessment and a pharmacoeconomic study, we do plan to do that. We have not yet done so, and when we do so, we will be, of course, disclosing that and giving some information on that. But that is definitely something that we plan to do. With regard to Europe in general, our approach is to complete the FDA submission, and once we've completed the FDA submission, to use that submission as part of our submission to the EU, and so that should hopefully be happening, sometime, later this year, early next year.
Okay, got it. And just looking at clinicaltrials.gov, it looks like the Columbia University study of motixafortide in pancreatic cancer is still running. I'm just wondering if if we can expect to see any data from that in 2022 or maybe next year. Any clarity on that would be helpful.
Yeah, so as we disclosed in our public filings, we're now looking at potentially some data coming out in the second half of this year. However, I do want to say that since we're not controlling the study and it's being done, it's an investigator-initiated study, we have less control over the timing. So our current estimates are sometime in the second half of this year, but again, it's caveated by the fact that it's an investigator-initiated study.
Of course. Okay. Thank you so much for taking the questions.
Okay, great. Have a great day.
The next question is from John Vandermosten of Zacks. Please go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon, Phil and Molly. How are you doing?
Good. Good to speak to you.
Yes, and you as well. What efforts have you made so far to fill out the commercialization process? And I'm also wondering how the pitch would go to payers and providers, assuming approval for motixafortide in SCM.
So you'd like to know what activities? I didn't hear the first part of the question. You want to sort of know what the pre-launch activities are that we're doing right now? Is that the first part of the question?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so I mean, the first one. So we're doing. I mean, there are a lot of things that I think we've mentioned that we're maintaining optionality. We're speaking with potential partners, commercialization partners, but we're also looking at launching independently, and a lot will depend on the value that we believe would bring the highest amount of value for the product. And so we really have two main principles here. One is launching on time, doing whatever it takes to launch on time, and the second principle, of course, is to maximize the value of the asset. And so with that overall philosophy and approach in mind, we have initiated a number of critical activities that would be required for us to do under any circumstance. So those are things like supply chain partnerships, like commercial packaging, serialization. We've also initiated medical affairs activities because we want to already sort of drive the key scientific messages in our areas of interest in an investigator-initiated study program. We've completed our brand name selection and we've submitted it to the FDA, and we've also initiated branding efforts to make sure that they're all in place for those submissions. We're looking at also at market access activities that we're starting to initiate. For example, third-party logistics, 3PL selection, distribution network strategy, etc. So we are HEOR studies. So we're moving forward with these kind of activities that need to be done under any circumstance, so that we can whether if we partner along the way, then we'll be able to still make sure that the launch happens on time. And if not, and if we decide to go forth independently, then of course these are activities that must be done. So that's the first part of your question. Can you remind me of the second part of the question? The pitch?
It was just the pitch that you'd make to payers and providers. But before I ask that, actually, what about a hybrid model? model. Might that make sense at all, or does it not make sense to split it up with only 80 targeted places in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of, that I think in any event, the idea would be, I think even, when we're speaking with partners, obviously this is a market that's, custom made to really focus on the top 80 institutions because they represent, or the top 79 institutions represent over 80% of all the stem cell transplantations in the U.S. So I think that, based on, what our discussions with also potential partners, but also just our own analyses, it makes sense to really focus on those institutions. And by the way, of those institutions, we have a number of those institutions were part of our phase 3 trial, so we already have, the physicians there, the hospital itself, they're aware of the efficacy and the clinical benefit of our drug. And then, of course, on an opportunistic basis, it would make sense to then spread out to, some of the larger institutions amongst the 130 additional institutions that make up the full 212 hospitals across the U.S. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Now, as far as our pitch...
Just on the pitch, yeah. I guess like the short elevator pitch that you'd make,
Yeah, well, the short elevator pitch would be, depending on how many stories there are in the building, but I'd have to say that one apheresis session, we can mobilize the target number of cells in 90% of the cases. We can give much more certainty to the apheresis units regarding the amount of apheresis sessions that the patients have to undergo, because right now the scheduling and the logistic issues are, a nightmare at these institutions. In fact, we hear that sometimes transplantations or the whole process has to be delayed because they cannot guarantee that a new patient will have, a seat or a machine that they can use. I think also the safety benefits are, of course, of having lower apheresis sessions are very important. I think the fact that even if you require more than one apheresis session, because of the receptor occupancy and the long receptor occupancy of our molecule, we can get 2 apheresis sessions out of only one administration, which is on top of GCSF, which is a huge advantage. I think that's the main elevator pitch. Obviously, we believe, and our studies show that we're also more cost-effective. So the logistics, the clinical benefit to the patients, the cost benefit to the entire system, and payers, etc. So I think that's our main pitch.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
There are no further questions at this time. Before I ask Mr. Phil Serlin to go ahead with his closing statement, I would like to remind participants that a replay of this call is scheduled to begin in 2 hours after the conference. In the U.S., please call 1-888-295-2634. In Israel, please call 03-92-55904. Internationally, please call 972-3-9255-904. Mr. Serlin, would you like to make your concluding statement?
Yes, I would. Thank you, operator. To summarize, we remain on track to submit our NDA for motixafortide and stem cell mobilization mid-year, while we in parallel advance key pre-launch activities that would be required under any commercialization scenario. We are maintaining full optionality with respect to the commercialization of motixafortide in the U.S., with the ultimate goal of executing a robust launch, if approved, that maximizes the value of the asset. We believe we can capture a significant share of a U.S. market estimated to be in excess of $360 million. From both a clinical and pharmacoeconomic perspective, we believe motixafortide on top of GCSF can quickly become the standard of care in this important indication. At the same time, we are working to expand the use of motixafortide in other indications, including PDAC, and are moving forward with the development of AGI-134. As we stated last quarter, we believe we have set the stage for a catalyst-rich year that will inform the evolution of the BioLine RX portfolio. Thank you all very much for your continued interest in BioLine RX, and we look forward to providing our next comprehensive update in August. Be safe and have a great day.
Thank you. This concludes the BioLine RX first quarter 2022 conference call. Thank you for your participation. You may go ahead and disconnect.